you know, Damon is humorous. He finds humor in things because he is very angry and very lonely, and which makes him funny at times, you know? And so I think that there's, you know, there are a lot of layers that go in to making this guy why he is the way he is. And at first sight, yeah, he could just appear to be pretty mean. But I think maybe if you dive in a little bit, you might find some justification somewhere.
I'm bad, Elena. I am bad for you.
Far be it from me to cause a problem.
Why don't you let people see the good in you?
Some people see good, they expect good. And I don't want to have to live up to anyone's expectations.
I thought you broke my heart, so I rip open Aaron's neck. That is how much control you have over me.
Elena breaks up with you, and your first instinct is to go on a killing spree. Could you be any more predictable?
You screwed up, Damon. Again.
Thank you.
I mean, you hate me. The earth is back on its axis.
You keep pushing people away, you're gonna end up alone.
No, I was trying to prevent myself from making mistakes, Stefan.
And why is that so hard for you, Damon? Don't say Elena. You lived 160 years before you met her. Where are your instincts, Damon? What does the voice in your head say?
If you asked me 10 years ago who my favorite character was from the CW classic, The Vampire Diaries, I would probably say Damon Salvatore. If you ask me now who my favorite character from The Vampire Diaries was, I'd still say Damon Salvatore, with Caroline Forbes being a runner-up. If you ask me which character was treated the worst, me along with almost every Black person with a brain and critical thinking skills will tell you Bonnie Bennett. One only needs to watch at least 2 seasons to figure that out on their own. While Kat Graham gives an incredible performance, is incredibly gorgeous, and does a lot with the crumbs she is given, she is a horribly written character. Despite being more important plot-wise than, say, a Caroline, a Matt, or a Tyler, they are all given much more complexity and depth than Bonnie. Their family lives and backstories are more fleshed out. When their family members die, we spend much more time focusing on their grief than we do with Bonnie, who also suffers many losses. And they all arguably have much more interesting love lives than Bonnie as well. The writers never failed to let you know which character they consider to be their faves.
Who do I like better, Bonnie or Caroline? Please say Caroline.
You love them both equally.
Well, that's a shocker.
Favoritism has always been a huge problem with the Vampire Diaries, because for one, POC characters never seem to be considered faves, as besides Bonnie, they are often killed off almost as soon as you meet them. And 2, this favoritism ends up harming other characters, Bonnie being one of them. This will be discussed more at length in another video that I'm working on about this show, but for now I'll just say the amount of time that is spent on trying to make Enzo happen in season 6 is emblematic of this issue. He was clearly a fave amongst the writers. He was basically the season 1 version of Damon Salvatore. He had dark hair, he loved being a vampire, and at times was just as heartless and ruthless as Damon. He also had a British accent, which if you've seen this show, you'll know they love people with British accents.
You have an accent. Anything you say is automatically fascinating.
And no shade to Michael Malarkey, his last name is awesome, but like, that accent was doing a lot for him, let's just say. Enzo gets an entire storyline in season 6, a storyline that proves to be absolutely pointless. It's not an unpopular opinion to say that Enzo becomes one of the most useless characters to ever exist in the TVD universe. He is more useless than Matt Donovan, and I did not think that that was ever possible. The fact that the writers are fine with wasting screen time on a character that no one really seemed to like or care about, while Bonnie can't even get a storyline that exists outside of being a savior for the other characters, is infuriating to say the least. But it's a part of a much larger issue that becomes more and more apparent with this show after season 3. The season that most TVD fans will agree is where the show peaked. For those unfamiliar with the show, it's a supernatural teen drama centered around a teenage girl by the name of Elena Gilbert, who along with her little brother Jeremy have just lost both of their parents in a tragic car accident that she was involved in. The pilot episode begins 4 months after their deaths. Now living with their Aunt Jenna as their legal guardian, both siblings struggle to deal with their new lives. Elena ends up becoming the romantic target of both Damon and Stefan Salvatore. Both brothers, Damon being the oldest, have always had a complicated relationship. Complicated being an understatement. Turned in 1864 by Elena's doppelganger Catherine Pierce, the brothers have spent over a century at each other's throats due to this love triangle. Both Damon and Stefan are like night and day. Damon being the more impulsive, sensitive, and hot-headed of the two, and Stefan, once being a blood addict / remorseless ripper, by the beginning of season 1 is seen as the more mature, more in control, less impulsive brother who chooses to consume animal blood instead of hunting down innocent humans for his dinner. Upon their first day of school, Elena and Stefan fall in love instantly, and after Elena learns of his true identity, she decides that she trusts him and can handle being with a vampire. The vampires in this universe abide by different rules than most common in movies and shows about vampires. Vampires in this show have the ability to walk in the sun if they are donning some jewelry spelled by a witch. They have the power to compel humans and force them to do whatever they want. They have super speed, can leap onto buildings, and can listen in on people's conversations from afar. Throughout the series, the characters become more and more involved in the supernatural occurrences that become the norm in the fictional town of Mystic Falls, Virginia. Bonnie Bennett learns that she is a witch, and that her family lineage consists of powerful witches. Emily Bennett, her great-great-great-great-grandmother, was Catherine's handmaiden, which is this show's code word for slave, back in 1864. She created the Salvatore brothers' daylight rings. After Elena learns that Catherine is basically her twin and is understandably disturbed by this, we learn that she was adopted and that the reason Elena survived the car accident was because Stefan saved her. And when he did, he noticed how much she looked like Catherine. Despite looking exactly like her, he, along with every other old vampire who knew Catherine, never forget to remind Elena how much she isn't like Catherine at all.
You are not Catherine.
He's not Catherine.
But we all know that you're not Catherine.
She's not Catherine.
Catherine, born Katerina Petrova, was a 500-year-old vampire who turned herself in 1492 after learning that she was to be sacrificed in a ritual for Klaus Michelson, an original vampire who wanted to become a true hybrid. Catherine needed to be human for the ritual, and so Klaus retaliated by murdering her entire family, which sent Catherine running for 500 years. This loss, in my personal opinion, understandably turned Catherine into a shadow of her former self. She became a selfish, stone-hearted, manipulative user who only looks out for herself. One of her most famous lines being, "Better you than I." Elena is the complete opposite, or at least that's what we're supposed to think. Watch my other video. She is kind and compassionate and whatever else Stefan says in that one scene.
Elena's warm, and she's kind, and she's caring, and she's selfless.
This is a huge part of why Stefan falls in love with her, as with Catherine, his love for her wasn't real. She compelled him to love her after revealing her identity to him and then proceeded to use him as a human blood bag. Elena's tie to Catherine is ultimately what leads Elena to become a constant target of supernatural enemies. It's what puts Elena in a very damsel-y role. She is always needing to be rescued, and people's lives, mainly Bonnie's, are treated as secondary and less significant, despite Bonnie being the most significant. This is partially why Elena is one of the most contentious characters amongst the fandom. There are many people who hate her and some that really love her and feel she faces a lot of undue criticism for being a crybaby or annoying or selfish.
Stefan, what are you doing with Rebecca? She tried to kill me.
And this will be the second time that Damon tried to kill Jeremy. So I guess nobody's perfect, right?
I want Jeremy to kill Cole. You want him to kill an original? Think about it. Cole's sire line must stretch to the moon by now. If Jeremy kills Cole, every vampire that he's ever turned, not to mention everyone that they've turned, will die. Which means the hunter's mark will be complete and we'll have our key to finding the cure.
In my first TVD video, I dissect the character of Elena Gilbert, and I try to offer some constructive criticism of a character that I myself have always had huge problems with. There is certainly a lot of unfair and slut-shaming criticism that I have heard over the years that I no longer agree with, but I don't think I could ever say that Elena is well written. Seasons 1 through 2 are probably the golden years, not just for the show, but for our main 3 leads. In the beginning, Elena is presented to us as a big sister who has to sort of take on the role of surrogate mother to her brother Jeremy, who has fallen off the wagon by smoking weed to deal with the trauma of losing both of his parents 4 months prior. Everyone in the show is so mean to Jeremy for smoking weed as if he's smoking crack, and they're all like, "Why are you so sad about both of your parents dying at the same time? It's been 4 whole months, you weirdo."
People are gonna stop giving you breaks, Jer. They just don't care anymore. They don't remember that our parents are dead because they've got their own lives to deal with. The rest of the world has moved on. You should try too.
All right, it's the third day of school and he's skipped 6 of his classes.
Mr. Tanner, are you aware that Jeremy and Elena's parents died?
4 months ago, a great loss. Car accident. It's his attempt at coping this summers. And the signs are there. He's moody, withdrawn, argumentative, hungover.
You're the kid with the big house who's acting out because his parents died.
Throughout the season, or honestly the series, Elena makes many questionable choices regarding her brother and his safety. As much as Elena's attitude towards him and how she treats him can be disconcerting, she is a teenager and I don't expect her to be that smart or that good at handling these kinds of issues. Hell, I wouldn't even know what to do if I lost both of my parents as a teenager, let alone an adult. She just wants to take care of her little brother and she also wants him to be okay, and so I don't need all of her decisions to be perfect. The problem is that the writers don't really see Elena's mistakes as true mistakes that she should be condemned for and should grow from. We're always meant to side with her when it comes to almost everything. However, the first season handled this much better than subsequent seasons. In the beginning, there was a character named Vicky Donovan, who is the older sister of Matt Donovan, who was also the ex-boyfriend of Elena Gilbert. Vicky is probably one of the most wronged characters that I've ever seen in a TV show. The way they treat this poor girl is so fucked up in retrospect. In short, Vicky was in a love triangle with Jeremy and Tyler Lockwood. Tyler, who was on the football team with Matt and in the beginning, is a complete asshole. Tyler treats Vicky like garbage. In the pilot episode at a back-to-school party, he gets drunk and tries to assault Vicky before Jeremy intervenes. After this, she is attacked in the woods by Damon, although we don't know that at first. She continues to be attacked by Damon from here on out. Eventually, after Tyler treats her like trash one last time, she decides to finally go and be with Jeremy. But before the two can truly be happy, Damon attacks her again and then decides to turn her into a vampire due to boredom.
I was bored.
You did this to me out of boredom?
It's one of the pitfalls of eternity.
This ends up being one of the worst things he could have done, as Vicky struggles to control her urges and ends up posing a problem for the brothers. Stefan tries to help her, but his efforts fail. And when Vicky attacks Elena one night at a Halloween party with the intent to kill her, Stefan drives a wooden plank through her heart. Elena is sad for her brother, who has now lost another person close to him. And so she asks Stefan to compel away his memory of watching Vicky die in front of him. Damon takes the offer instead, since he drinks human blood and his compelling abilities are stronger than Stefan's.
I want you to tell him that Vicky left town and she's not coming back. That he shouldn't look for her or worry about her. He's gonna miss her, but he knows it's for the best.
After this, Jeremy's life does a complete 180. He stops smoking the devil's lettuce, he starts studying and doing better in school, and generally just seems a lot happier than before. Now, while the whole idea of compelling is actually kind of gross when you think about it, especially when we see vampires compelling people to sleep with them and be their girlfriends, I understand why Elena did this. I don't agree with it, but I can understand why she did it. Again, this is her little brother. I am not an older sibling, I'm actually the youngest of my sisters, but I can imagine being an older sibling, you feel protective of your younger sibling. Plus again, Elena is supposed to be like 17. I don't expect a 17-year-old to have good conflict resolution, especially when it comes to a unique situation such as this. Towards the end of the season, Vicky's body is found in the woods and Matt, along with everyone else, learn that she is dead and has been dead for a while. When Jeremy confronts Elena, expressing doubt over what happened to Vicky, whose death has just been ruled as an overdose, she shuts him down, but he catches on to the fact that she is lying, and so he decides to sneak into her room and read her diary. This is where he learns the truth about Vicky and about Damon erasing his memories. Obviously, this upsets Jeremy and he becomes very angry with his sister. Elena apologizes to him and says when Vicky died, it felt like a repeat of their mom and dad. She tells him she just wanted to take away his pain and that she's sorry. So this entire incident almost ruined her relationship with her brother, and after this season, we're led to believe this was a mistake that Elena made and has now learned from. Except she hasn't. Because in season 3, when Elena feels that all of this supernatural nonsense has become way too normal for Jeremy, she decides to have Damon erase his memories again and send him away. Bonnie calls her out for this and chastises her for always wanting to control what everyone else does.
Bonnie, you can't tell him. Why? Are you gonna compel me not to?
Are you gonna compel me not to? most iconic line she's ever uttered. Despite that incredible line, this doesn't end with Jeremy finding out anything. In fact, he never finds out that Elena went behind his back and had Damon violate his mind once again. This is bad, because this is the sign of character regression. Elena is big on trust and personal autonomy from the beginning. Matt tells Stefan that it's something that is very important to her. And when she begins dating Stefan after learning that he is a vampire, they both agree to be completely honest with each other from here on out. She doesn't like people lying to her and making plans without her involvement. And yet it's totally fine for her to do the same to others. She lies to people all the time and makes plans behind people's backs, but again, it's Elena, so we're not supposed to be mad at her for this. It's rich how in 2 episodes after that one, Caroline's father, Bill, is killed with vampire blood in his system, which means he'll come back to life as a vampire and will have to feed on human blood to complete the transition. If he doesn't, he will die. We learn earlier in season 3 that Caroline's father is a vampire hater and is initially devastated to learn that Caroline is now one of them. He decides that he's not going to complete the transition. Caroline is absolutely crushed to learn this. Even though he tortured her and tried to change her nature, she still wants to save him. At one point, she tells Elena that she's going to force him to feed, but Elena tells her that he doesn't want to, and that all he has now is his choice.
The only thing your dad has is his choice.
She picks and chooses when it's important to respect people's choices, and it's so irritating that Caroline doesn't even bring up the Jeremy thing at this moment. At least then it would have at least felt that the writers were self-aware and recognized that what Elena did was wrong. Yes, she does tell Matt in that episode that what she did was wrong, but she still has the nerve to act self-righteous in moments like this. I mean, I don't disagree that Caroline shouldn't force him to feed. I don't agree with anyone being forced to do things that they don't want to do. I'm just saying that Elena shouldn't be the one saying it without someone calling out her hypocrisy at the very least. This is part of why Elena is such a frustrating character for a lot of TVD fans. The writing of Elena Gilbert suffers from main character syndrome, and no, not that one. She suffers from a problem with a lot of main characters in TV shows. Characters like Roy Gilmore from The Gilmore Girls or Brandon Walsh from Beverly Hills 90210. All 3 of them being protagonists, and while protagonists do not have to be good, these protagonists are supposed to be. I would argue Brandon is probably the worst example of this. In future 90210 videos, I will discuss this more, but Brandon has to be one of the worst characters in that show. Even Jason Priestley, who played him for almost 10 years, has constantly referred to him as a self-righteous prick. Because he is. The problem is that the writers do not think he is a self-righteous prick. They think he's amazing, and like with Rory and Elena, every other character thinks they are too. The character of Steve, his best friend, is written to always be jealous of him, and Brandon is written to always be the one getting Steve out of the messes he's always making for himself. Every woman who dates him is an insecure mess who act like they're going to die if he leaves them, even though he's an asshole. And his younger twin sister, Brenda, played by the late great Shannon Doherty, is presented as the more troublesome child of Jim and Cindy. It's actually very sexist the way the family dynamic is written, and Brenda will sometimes call them out for this, but it doesn't seem to change by the time Brenda leaves the show in season 4. These characters are not only favored by the writers, but they're so favored that the writers themselves can't help but constantly be on their side, even in situations where they shouldn't be. Being too obsessed with the supposed goodness of your own main character is what makes fans despise them. And when you're a character like Elena, who is written as though the world revolves around her and her best friend Bonnie is made to always be willing to sacrifice herself for her, and the show never poses this as a problem but a necessity, it is no wonder that people would hate them, even if it's not the character's fault but the fault of the writers. If Elena had the more nuanced writing of, say, a Caroline, maybe we wouldn't hate her so much. Elena expects things from others, things that people are not supposed to expect from her. When she begins dating Damon in season 4, everyone is just supposed to be okay with it, despite the fact that no one really needs to or should. Damon has put all of her loved ones in harm's way, has sexually assaulted one of them, and killed Jeremy in front of her because she rejected his sexual advances. Yes, he came back to life due to a supernatural ring he was wearing, but Damon did not know he was wearing it. When they begin dating and Stefan finds out and is heartbroken, he begins sleeping with Rebecca, who is the younger sister of Klaus and Elijah, 2 original vampires. Rebecca and Stefan had a fling in the 1920s, and the necklace Stefan gives her in season 1, we learn actually belonged to her. Because of this, Rebecca has always hated Elena because the way this show writes women is very sexist and annoying, and women have to hate each other over men all the time. I'm not saying it's unrealistic. Women do be hating each other for dumbass reasons. It just happens so often in the show that it just becomes kind of lazy in my opinion. So when Elena finds out that they're fucking, she has the nerve to scold him for this because Rebecca has tried to kill her. Thankfully, the writers give Stefan a chance to call her out for being a hypocrite. But this is rare. It is rare for characters to call Elena for always making everything about herself and for making excuses for people like Damon, but expecting other people to never associate with people who have harmed her. Her relationship with Damon becomes an important aspect of Elena's goodness. Elena is always giving him chances because she sees the good in him. And as the show goes on, it becomes clear that Damon could literally bomb an abortion clinic because an abortionist looked at him the wrong way, and Elena, along with the DE fandom, would still find a way to forgive him. Regardless, Elena is still painted as a good person, someone we're supposed to always be rooting for, and even when she wrongs other characters, it is her who we are meant to empathize with. Always. This becomes especially tiring in future seasons because once she and Damon start dating, her entire personality becomes consumed by their relationship. She becomes a worse person, but we're still supposed to like her. In fact, her dating Damon is supposed to be a part of her character development, even though her dating him is when her character completely regresses and becomes just as one note as Damon. Speaking of...
Talking about Kai, this show and this character were an enormous psychological experiment. And I always said this, Damon could walk into, I mean, no, this is like a really, by the way, this is just an analogy. It's super dark. I'm just prefacing it by that. But I even said this like I said this to EW in print. Like, this was amazing to me. Damon could literally walk into an orphanage and kill like 20 kids in cold blood. And literally the audience would say, oh, you know, he had a fight with Elena. He was in a bad mood. There was no bourbon. I mean, they would make excuses for this man. By the way, I'm not kidding.
That's true.
The audience would make excuses for this man to no end. They would follow him to the ends of the earth for a reason, I guess, was that they felt something for him, that he was authentic, he was approachable, he was vulnerable. But to speak of, Julie and Kevin had to beat it into my head. Now, this is so many years ago, so it doesn't matter. It's like, it's not like, you know, gossip, but I was so upset about the trajectory of Damon. So much so that at one point I was sitting across from Julie in her office in Atlanta, almost in tears, so angry about this. And she said, dude, I get it. Kevin had to say this too. Damon cannot be a one-trick pony. This is the 100 episode arc of a man. Mind you, we didn't know it was going to be 172 episodes, but this is a 100 episode arc of a man. There are ups and there are downs, and there are times when he's a villain, there's times when he's a hero, just like Julie mentioned earlier. And that scene when he breaks Jeremy's neck was it blew up in all of our faces. We were sitting there going, oh my gosh, we had no idea this was the path that this would allow us to go on. And it served the character really well. And the other thing about it, this is what I always said about Elena. And Chris and I joked about this too. He didn't just it's not like he tried to kill her brother once. He did it again. That just proves to you the levels that this man can go to.
Damon Salvatore was born in June of 1839, according to his wiki page. Being the first son of Lily and Giuseppe Salvatore meant more pressure and expectations, as is common with oldest children. In the beginning, we learned that Damon fought for the Confederacy, but left on his own terms, so I guess it's fine. We don't need to talk anymore about that. Due to this, though, Giuseppe became very disappointed in Damon, and this only added to their already strained relationship. We learned seasons later that Damon not only has daddy issues, but mommy issues as well. His mother Lily suffered physical and emotional abuse at the hands of Giuseppe, something that is never mentioned until season 7, so it's definitely a retcon. What isn't retconned, however, is the fact that their mother Lily died of consumption, aka tuberculosis, when Stefan was very young, or so they think. Before this, as we learned in another retconned flashback in season 7, Damon always resented his mother for, in his eyes, allowing their father to be abusive towards them. We could say his mom is partially why Damon seems to have such a complicated relationship with women in general. One such woman is the aforementioned Catherine Pierce. Earlier I noted that Stefan was compelled to be with Catherine, but Damon wasn't.
Catherine never compelled me. I knew everything, every step of the way. It was real for me.
His love for her was real, and he didn't mind that she was a vampire. He drank from her willingly, unlike Stefan, who drank from her against his will. Damon wanted to spend forever with Catherine, but Stefan, being the second half of the love triangle, fucked up that plan. See, the town of Mystic Falls has a secret founders council that involves members of the founding families. This council is aware of the existence of vampires, and their goal is to eradicate them. One of their tactics being the use of vervain, a plant that acts as vampires' kryptonite. It can be ingested, liquefied, and worn. When Giuseppe suspects that Stefan and Damon are associating with the vampire, he slips vervain into Stefan's tea. This results in Catherine being poisoned when she feeds on him afterward.
Tell him we have a vampire.
What? No.
Do as I say, son. Nothing that you feel for her is real. She's a vampire, Stefan, a monster.
She, along with a slew of other vampires, are then rounded up and thrown in a church to burn. Again, or so we think. And more importantly, so Damon thinks. Stefan and Damon try to save Catherine, who is being carted away to the church, but are shot unknowingly by their father. Due to them both drinking from Catherine, they come back to life as vampires, but now must feed on human blood to complete the transition. Under the impression that Catherine is dead, they both decide not to feed, which would in due time result in them dying.
This was all to be with Catherine. She's gone. I want it over.
Things don't go as planned when Stefan goes to say goodbye to his father in his office. He confesses to being a vampire and tells him that he plans to die, and Giuseppe is ready to help him with that. He comes at him and tries to kill him. Stefan throws him against a wall, causing him to bleed. The overwhelming amount of blood tempts him to feed on him until he is dead. As Damon explains this to Elena in Season 1, Episode 20, Blood Brothers, he tells her that when Stefan turned, he was a completely different person. This person who enjoyed feeding on human blood and felt more alive than ever, felt his brother needed to know what it was like, and so he forced him to turn. This revelation is how we learn why Damon has spent over a century hating his brother, and why Damon has returned to Mystic Falls. When we first meet Damon, we learn that they haven't seen each other in 15 years, and for about 8 episodes, Stefan tries to figure out why he's returned. After a comment, the theft of an ugly magical crystal, and a few tense run-ins with Bonnie, who also gets a hold of the ugly magical crystal, he reveals that Catherine and the other vampires didn't die in the church, and that they were put in a tomb that was magically sealed by Emily. When they manage to get the tomb open, however, Damon learns to his dismay that Catherine isn't there, and that Catherine actually managed to escape, knew where Damon was the entire time, but did not care. Throughout Season 1, Damon is shown to be the complete opposite of Stefan. Upon Stefan's return, the town becomes a not-so-safe haven when people begin being murdered by an unknown animal, or so the town is led to believe, by the police, who eventually learn do know that it is a vampire. Stefan is left to clean up Damon's messes, especially when he goes after Vicky and then Caroline, Elena's best friend. Caroline takes a liking to Damon after seeing him at the grill. Damon decides to turn Caroline into his mind-controlled human blood bag / fuck toy. When Stefan finds out about this, he chastises Damon, but Damon tells him that he can do whatever the fuck he wants to do with his little cheerleader. Which, ew. Due to the comedic way Caroline was written in Season 1, her bitchiness and her jealousy towards Elena, I feel is a part of why we as an audience did not instantly recognize what Damon did to her as not only abuse, but rape. On some level, Caroline being attacked and fed on is a punishment for hooking up with a strange man she just met. This is arguably one of Damon's worst crimes, and it's something that happens during the first 5 episodes. We are introduced to someone who is heartless, especially against young women. Caroline was not the last BFF of Elena Gilbert that was victimized by Damon Salvatore. He also attacked her best friend Bonnie and almost killed her before Stefan saved her with his blood. Damon commits some very heinous actions during the first season, but I can't say that I didn't enjoy watching him. In the beginning, Damon had an interesting arc. We're led to think that he is this heartless vampire with no humanity left in him, but as the season progresses, we learn that isn't true at all. As much as Damon proclaims that he hates his brother, it becomes very clear that he loves him, as he is always there to save him when he's in trouble and vice versa. Paul Wesley and Ian Somerhalder as Stefan and Damon is probably one of the best casting choices in a TV show that I've ever seen. I always enjoy their scenes together because the actors play really well off of each other, and they both make a meal of these roles. Damon does a good job of pretending as though he absolutely relishes being a vampire, that he has no care in the world and that nothing phases him. But his true loneliness becomes apparent halfway through Season 1. It becomes a running joke that Damon doesn't have any friends because he's a dick, something that Damon is aware of and will proudly admit.
Oh sure, hey, Damon Salvatore.
I know. Heard great things about you.
Really? That's weird. I'm a dick.
Something that I liked about Damon in the beginning was his self-awareness. He knows he's a terrible person but doesn't feel he can do better, and doesn't feel he has a reason to. I also really liked his cynicism. I am also very cynical, and when he talks about how having feelings suck, as someone with terrible depression, I can't say I've never felt that way.
I feel, Elena. Okay? And it sucks.
He spent 100 years waiting for the opportunity to bring back Catherine, his one true love. When she returns, she tells him that she never even loved him. This sends Damon into a jealous rage. After this, he gets drunk and, as mentioned earlier, tries to force her to kiss him as she pushes him away. Elena repeats a similar stance as Catherine and declares that she loves Stefan, and it's always going to be Stefan. So he punishes her by snapping her brother's neck in front of her. I said in my last TVD video that at the time, I thought this was definitely it for Damon. I felt there was no way Elena could forgive him for this. Damon, intent on getting Elena to forgive him, lies about his knowledge of the Gilbert ring Jeremy was wearing, the ring that brought him back to life. But he soon admits to her that he actually didn't know and that he doesn't know what he would have done if he wasn't wearing it. For a while, Elena despises Damon for this, and Elena's anger towards him is what pushes Damon to do the right thing. Towards the end of season 1, Elena begins to call out Damon for pretending to not care about things. This is posed as a challenge for Damon, who doesn't want people to know that he does actually care. Stefan and Elena become aware of Damon's newfound love for her. This makes Damon jealous, but Elena assures him that she loves him and she tries to be Damon's friend. As his friend, Elena continuously encourages him to be the better man, even after she has witnessed him harm one of the few family members she has left.
You need to stop doing that.
Doing what?
Assuming that I'll play the good guy because it's you who's asking.
Be the better man, Damon.
In season 2, we meet a woman named Rose. This woman, who was a vampire, knew Catherine in 1492. It was her blood that was in Catherine's system when she hung herself. She, along with her best friend Trevor, were involved in helping Catherine escape, and so this put a target on their back, as well as Catherine. They too have spent 500 years running, and they both hate Catherine for getting them caught up in her mess. At the end of the Masquerade episode, Elena is kidnapped by Trevor and Rose, who bring her to Elijah, Klaus's brother. Elijah ends up brutally killing Trevor for betraying him, which obviously devastates Rose, who after escaping from Elijah decides to stay in Mystic Falls. Her second biggest mistake. She and Damon end up befriending each other, and Rose also sees through Damon's tough, uncaring macho act. As much as I hate how much of a Delena fan she is, I have always liked their friendship because Damon seems to truly care about her, and I like the fact that Rose isn't afraid to tell him about himself. Rose's insights into Damon's sometimes beating heart are confirmed when Damon's overconfident arrogance inadvertently leads to her getting bit by a werewolf that was coming to bite him.
You think I'm afraid of you?
No, I don't. That's your vampire arrogance. You haven't had this a long time. And any other night of the month, the situation would be reversed. But tonight, it's not the night to pick a fight with me.
A werewolf bite can kill a vampire, and we don't learn until later that Klaus's blood is the only cure. As Rose slowly dies a painful and excruciating death, Damon, as usual, pretends like he doesn't care, but Elena can tell that he does. Vampires in this show have the ability to enter someone's mind and essentially give them dreams while they are asleep. And in her final moments, Damon lays with her and leaves her with a beautiful, happy dream of them in the fields with horses and her as a human, something she says she misses.
I miss being human.
Humanity's not all it's cracked up to be.
I had friends, I had a family. I mattered.
You still do.
No. I spent 500 years just existing.
You didn't have a choice. You were running from Klaus.
No, there's always a choice.
He does this before staking her in the heart and putting her out of her misery. When Damon tells Elena that Rose is dead, he admits that he feels guilty about what happened because it was supposed to be him. Elena hugs him and he fights back tears. Friendly Space Ninja did a very good and very long and in-depth video about TVD and points to this episode as an example of Damon doing something genuinely good in the name of just being a good friend. Upon rewatch, I realized how much potential Damon had as a character. Learning to care for others, feeling guilty about his selfish actions, and wanting to do right in return. The best thing about this, though, is that it had nothing to do with Elena. Friendly Space Ninja says that people often criticize Damon for only doing good in the name of Elena Gilbert, and says that they feel this is kind of unfair because of what he does for Rose. I agree that what he does for Rose is very kind, but I don't think people are necessarily wrong in their criticism, because this really is the only time Damon does something out of pure selflessness. This is not something that would ever continue or evolve. No, unfortunately, Damon suffers from the same problem as Elena. That being that he is a favorite, and when you're a favorite on TVD, eventually the writing of said fave will begin to take a hit. Being too well liked by the writers is what would become a huge problem for the series, and is part of what causes the show to go downhill after season 3. I mentioned how Elena becomes his inspiration to sometimes be a good guy. He begins to care about Jeremy because of Elena, he starts being nicer to Bonnie and Caroline sometimes because of Elena, and as he begins to fall more and more in love with her, and he notices that she may have feelings for him too, he tries to be the man that she wants him to be. I think for the first few seasons, this could have been fine. All characters need an arc, and Damon's actions constantly being linked to whatever woman he's obsessed with at the moment could have been an interesting pattern that he has to learn to break out of. But that's not what happens. Earlier I said that Ian Somerhalder and Paul Wesley make meals out of these roles, and they do. Especially Ian. Both of them give performances that make you think they were built in a lab to play these characters. The same would go for Joseph Morgan, who plays Klaus. And while Ian certainly doesn't have as much range acting-wise as Paul does, he's still fun to watch, mainly in the first season. I don't mean to be rude when I say that, but if you've seen the show, it's very obvious that Damon really only has like 3 major personality traits: being ruthless, being funny, and also charming. And I suppose being sexy, so 4 personality traits. According to The Sims 3, being irresistible can be an important part of your personality. I personally believe it's important to be fair with people, and as much as I deeply dislike Damon in later seasons, Ian deserves credit for making Damon so likable. There is a reason why he was the most beloved of the 2 brothers for most TVD fans. And yeah, he's hot. His hair is kind of stupid to me, but he is very attractive, and as much as I hate Elena, if we ignore how sexist and rapey he is, I understand somewhat why Elena was attracted to him. And just based on little things he says from time to time throughout the show, I think we can confidently say that Damon definitely eats out. He definitely goes to town. Damon goes from being a villain to an anti-hero, which admittedly I am tired of that term because it seems to only apply to male characters. Like, female characters who exhibit some of the same traits don't always have the luxury of being labeled an anti-hero, but it does fit with his arc in the first season. Unfortunately, this is his only arc, and this arc will be repeated in almost every season until the very end. Damon is not allowed to grow from his obsession with Elena, and Elena is not allowed to grow from her infatuation and fixation on pushing Damon to be better. Everything that Damon does from this point is contingent on whether Elena favors him at the moment. The minute Elena turns on him, he goes back to his old ways. As I said before, this could have been fine for a few seasons. When Elena leaves Stefan for Damon, he excitedly tells his friend Alaric that he got the girl, as though Elena is a prize. That is how Damon treats Elena, as a prize, not a person. He's happy that he is the brother that finally has been chosen by someone who looks like the woman he thought loved him. As Kiki G said in her video about Damon Salvatore, he's happy because someone in a Catherine bodysuit picked him.
He chased her for 100 years only to find out that she didn't give a fuck and always wanted Stefan. And so the fact that a human suit that looks like Catherine is actually picking him is the driving force behind the relationship. He doesn't care how or why she picks him. The only exception made is when they realize that there's a sire bond, so she's kind of forced to pick him. He objects to that, but they make it really clear that it's not really about right or wrong, and it's more about the fact that, I mean, he openly admits this, he can't tell if he's really picked, if it's like a magical compulsion to be picked. So it's like an ego issue rather than like a consent issue, which we could do a whole separate video about Damon and consent.
Not to shit on all DE fans, although that fandom was pretty toxic back in the day, but I can't see their relationship any other way. Damon has been lonely for the past 100 years. He made it a point to not commit to another woman until getting Catherine back.
And I need a woman for pleasure. I'm spoken for.
So it makes sense why he would become so codependent on Elena at first. She was the first woman he's loved since Catherine, and she is someone who has proven that she will never not forgive him for whatever horrible thing he's done that day. This is what makes Damon love her even more. He loves that she sees the good in him and will never give up on him. But therein lies the problem. There isn't a lot of good in Damon. Yes, he can be nice sometimes. Yes, Elena did soften him up a bit, but if the only reason you're doing good things is so that you can stay in someone else's good graces, how good are you? Do you truly want to be good? Do you have any actual morals? Stefan does spend the entire series making it clear that he will always protect Elena and will kill anyone who tries to hurt her. And in season 3, his motivation for recovery centers around how Elena sees him.
No matter what I go through to get her back, fighting my bloodlust, trying to gain control of my life again, none of that matters if she has feelings for somebody else.
But in being a good person or trying to be a good person does not hinge solely on Elena. When he and Elena break up, which is about 3 times throughout the series, he doesn't spiral and go back to his old Ripper days. He continues to care for her friends and family and even continues to be protective of her. The only time he doesn't is when Klaus compels him to turn off his humanity. Stefan is someone who can't help but feel the weight of his actions. He beats himself up constantly for the harm he has caused people in the past.
It hurts me. It hurts me knowing what I've done, and that pain is with me all the time.
This is something Damon never really does. DE fans and Damon fans will sometimes argue that judging Damon for his terrible actions is hypocritical because Stefan has also done terrible things, which is true. The difference is that Stefan is the only one of them who actually truly redeems himself. He doesn't rely on the emotional labor of a woman to help him do that. Yes, Elena is always there to encourage him, but he doesn't need it. He has his humanity, he has his principles, and he lived years before even knowing Elena in control of his bloodlust. This is something the writers do not allow Damon to ever do. Instead, Damon's storyline while consuming Elena becomes consumed by her in return. His entire world revolves around her. Damon hates women, doesn't really see them as people, but Elena is special. She's not like other girls. She sees the good in him and never gives up on him. And the show wants us to think that this is beautiful and admirable and romantic, but it's not.
And he always talks about, I love you so I can't be selfish with you. And that's the thing everybody holds on to. Oh, he loves her so he can't be selfish with her. And also the concept of I can't be selfish with you is made up. That's not a real thing. If a man ever says any version to you of you're exceptional, so I'm doing this thing differently, like you're not like other girls, or I'm not usually like this, or I'm just like this with you, run screaming for the hills, because selfish people will be selfish with people. They're not going to make an exception for you. All that means is that you are currently fitting into a made-up internal standard of respectability that they think women should have, and that is not a lasting place in their graces. And heaven help you when they get bored and decide to classify you the way that they've been treating everyone else. Assume that people will treat you the way that they treat other people, because you will not stay special forever. It doesn't work like that.
Bonnie, our witch character, who becomes the savior for the other characters in every season, is not someone that Damon ever truly cares about outside of Elena, and this is to me one of my biggest disappointments with the way he is written. See, after season 6, Nina Dobrev, who plays Elena, left the show entirely, and this caused the last 2 seasons of the series to be 2 of the worst seasons of the entire show, topping season 5, again, something I didn't think was ever possible. Part of why seasons 7 and 8 are also terrible is because the show couldn't let go of Elena. The world still revolved around her, and Damon's especially. Season 6 introduced Kai Parker, a siphoner vampire hybrid who has the power to siphon magic from other witches. He was that season's big bad. Long story short, he came from a family that was a part of the Gemini Coven. This coven trapped him in a magical prison world in which he lives the same day over and over and over again. During this season, we also meet a woman named Jo, who we learn later is Kai's twin sister, whom he stabbed in the stomach with a hunting knife in 1994. Jo and Alark end up becoming a couple. Jo ends up becoming pregnant, and the two decide to get married. In retaliation for Bonnie trying to trap him in another prison world after he almost killed her multiple times, he ruins Jo and Alark's wedding by stabbing Jo in the stomach and causing destruction.
Lark Saltzman, you are.
Oh my god!
Elena, who has taken a cure for vampirism and is now a human, is almost killed during this, but Kai tells Damon that he linked Bonnie and Elena's life together so that Elena can only wake up if Bonnie dies. The only reason the writers don't take this opportunity to kill Bonnie is because Nina was leaving the show. If she hadn't left the show, Bonnie would be dead. After this season, the show clearly struggled for an identity outside of Elena, and so did Damon. Even in season 7, where we're supposed to see Damon and Bonnie's relationship grow, his actions are still dependent on her. I think what's interesting about season 7 is how painful it is to watch Damon struggling to have a personality and a life outside of this woman who he only knew for a few years. Obviously, anyone would be beside themselves after losing someone they really loved, but this could have been an opportunity to develop his relationship with Bonnie on its own terms. There have always been fans who always wanted Damon and Bonnie to be endgame. As a Elena hater, I have never fully been on board with these two getting together. He tried to kill her, tells Elena that he would gladly let her die if it meant saving her instead, and is a fucking asshole to her on numerous occasions. His callous attitude towards her when he forces her mom to turn into a vampire to save Elena in season 3 is not something I've ever gotten over. It's so cruel, and he never truly apologizes to her for this.
You're still mad at me for what happened to Abby. Let me apologize. I'm sorry Elijah forced us to turn your mother into a vampire to save Elena's life. Didn't exactly have a choice.
He bosses her around, pressures her into doing spells to help them even when he knows she could potentially die. But I will say that if Damon needs to end up with someone, Bonnie actually does make way more sense than Elena. Like I said, Elena being the only reason Damon wants to be a good person could have been something Damon needs to evolve from, because he should. Your actions shouldn't solely depend on one person. As we see at the end of season 6, Elena is gone now. So why continue to center his storyline around Elena? Yes, season 7 and 8 also focus on his strained relationship with his brother, and they do have some interesting scenes together, but it's still all about Elena. When he tells Bonnie that he loves her for the first time, the writers go out of their fucking way to make it clear that he does not love her romantically.
I admire you. I believe in you. And I love you. The same way Elena loved you.
And the same way Elena loved you? Really? Really?
Are you fucking kidding me?
Damon and Bonnie developing a romance would have been so much more interesting to watch than the writers throwing her to Enzo. The one character none of the female characters were ever romantically interested in, and the one character no one gives a fuck about, interestingly. They've hated each other since season 1 and have had nothing but contentious interactions. He's tried to kill her, she's tried to kill him, and she's one of the few female characters who hands his ass back to him. Them getting together would have been really cool. It would have been nice to see Damon fall in love with someone who didn't look like Catherine. And this could have led to Damon truly apologizing and making up for all the times he treated Bonnie as if her life meant nothing. It drives me insane that Stefan and Damon never actually apologized to Bonnie for what happened to Grams when she died trying to save them, or why he never apologizes for turning her mom into a vampire. If he did that, that could have been what we call, what's the word? Growth?
You know what that is? It's growth.
It would have been nice to see him become his own person, develop an actual identity, have wants and goals for himself. It's funny how we never really learn what Damon wants to do with his life. We learned in season 1 that Stefan wanted to be a doctor and that he even worked as a paramedic during one of his lifetimes. I don't remember learning what Damon ever wanted to do with his life. His father always preferred Stefan because Stefan seemed more on the straight and narrow, whereas Damon didn't. But did Damon want to do anything other than be with a woman? If Damon's problem is that he can't learn to be happy with himself, why not have that be a part of his growth? Why not have him grow, period? The last season is such a disappointment because Damon once again goes back to his old ways after having probably the biggest redemption he's ever had. This time though, it's not his fault, as the show never stops reminding us, but that doesn't make it better.
So the Bonnie-Damon relationship, I mean, poor Bonnie, he just drags her repeatedly through the mud over and over again, and she still loves him. I don't know why. Crazy woman. But that was a sweet scene, and Bonnie does end up having a lot to do with it, but obviously, unfortunately, at her own expense. You know, I mean, Kat Graham is such a strong actor, and Bonnie is such a strong character that I want her, and you'll see her sort of start coming back into her own and sort of taking a lot less shit, you know. But she just has a huge heart, and when you have a huge heart and everyone wants something from you, it wears you down a little bit. So I think it's time for Bonnie to kick some ass.
I have been a TVD fan since I was about 13 or 14 years old. As much as this show drives me insane, as much as it pisses me off, I do love this show and I always enjoy rewatching it. But it's not always easy to rewatch. It's hard watching Damon continue to make the same predictable mistakes and continue to come to the same conclusion every single season. It's hard watching Damon and Elena have the same fights and the same conversations over and over again because the writers didn't know how to write them as an official couple. It's such a disservice to Damon and Ian, the actor, to constantly have him return to the same place and not have anything interesting to say about it. The writers clearly enjoyed watching him be bad, but knew they had to add something new. So they decide to double down on Damon's awfulness so that Elena's forgiveness can seem more profound and loving. It takes the cake for me when we learn that Damon murdered their Uncle Zach's wife, who was pregnant. This fact is brought up so nonchalantly by the other characters in season 8 in a way that really bothered me. Not only was she fully pregnant, she was also a black woman, and as per usual, the show does not ever want to mention the existence of racism. ever. This is just another one of Damon's terrible actions. Yes, Damon expresses guilt over this, but not nearly enough. In season 5, when he and Elena are dating and we're supposed to think he's better now, he admits he was still busy killing innocent people without her knowledge during their summer loving or whatever. Of course, Elena gets over it almost as soon as she finds out because all she cares about is Damon. But this is just another sign that Damon can't stop doing bad things.
I'm not defending your decision to kill Aaron's entire family, to go out of town and kill his aunt while we were still together.
So why are you still here? Choosing to not have to think about how you must feel every time some ghost from my past comes into our life.
Watching Damon tell Elena how he's bad and how he can't stop being bad is painful to watch every time. It's painful being Damon Salvatore, a man who can never change because he doesn't know what kind of person he wants to be. He has no direction other than trying to find a woman who can be miserable with him for eternity. Growing up outside the TVD fandom, all I ever heard was how Damon was always the more interesting character. Damon is the guy you want in a TV show, and Stefan is the guy you want in real life. I suppose if you're referring to seasons 1 through 3 Damon, I could maybe see what you mean, but I don't agree that Damon is more interesting.
So I posted on Instagram asking people if they were Team Damon or Team Stefan and why. And I was shocked to see that like 70% of people were Team Damon. And I was like, really? I thought at the very least it would be more split. But most people were Team Damon, and I also got a lot of messages saying things like, as the show goes on with the character development, it makes sense. I was Team Stefan in the beginning and then I became Team Damon too. You'll see it when you get there, you know, the show makes it make sense and you're rooting for Damon. And as the show went on and I saw Damon not evolve at all, I was so worked up over the fact that so many people were rooting for this behavior. And I was so worked up over the idea of the writers of the show putting this narrative together for their demographic, which is mostly young women. And I realized that basically I'm really triggered by the Damon Elena storyline, and not that it happened, because I think it makes sense for those types of relationships to exist on shows. The fact that the show wrote that they live happily ever after together and they have like a long full life as humans made me really emotional, because it's legitimately damaging to teach young women that a character who does the things that Damon does can give you a happily ever after, because it's a lie, and it's a dangerous lie, because vampires are fake, but Damons are so real.
People always say Stefan is boring, and people are of course entitled to their own opinion, but I find that to be so baffling. Stefan is arguably the best written character in the show and has the most fleshed out backstory of the main characters. And his redemption arc is one of the best written arcs out of everybody. The only thing interesting about Damon is that he's funny sometimes. He's sexy and he does that thing with his eyebrows. But like Elena, he is poorly written but is highly favored by the writers. So despite the fact that he never truly changes, the writers want to make you think he has. Towards the end of season 3, Stefan recommends Elena and Damon go on a road trip to go and see Jeremy for reasons I don't feel like explaining, just watch the show. Here is where Elena, I guess, discovered how sexy Damon was, and they end up making out. Jeremy catches them and is rightfully disgusted by this, even though Ghost Rose tries to tell Jeremy he shouldn't because he's better for her. He challenges her.
I know you want to stop it. Protect her from it. But you're young. You don't see what I see. Damon challenges her. Surprises her. He makes her question her life. Beliefs.
Love you, Rose, but no. Elena has some reservations about her feelings for Damon because he's Damon. He's sensitive, is easily triggered, and will lash out over anything. But Elena's honesty offends Damon.
Or maybe you're hoping I'll screw it up so I can just make the decision for you. Am I wrong?
Damon.
Am I wrong?
It's what you do, Damon. I mean, think about it. Every time there's a bump in the road, you lash out.
I'm sorry, Elena. But this time I'm not gonna make it so easy for you.
This scene is so fascinating because Elena is right to be scared to be with Damon. Other than, you know, him raping her best friend, trying to kill her other BFF, and killing her brother, but obviously Elena doesn't care about that, so we have to move on to the next thing, which is that Damon has rage issues and doesn't know how to respond to anything maturely. But because Damon occasionally, when he's not pissed off, will do something good, we're supposed to think that Elena is just afraid to take that next step out of a justified fear. They succeed in doing this, for many DE fans that is, by putting Stefan on the back burner and having him refer to Damon as the better man, and crediting Elena with being the reason he's such a good guy now, and therefore it is a requirement, I guess, that she always be with him.
It's incredibly weird, but I know my brother, and I know he's a better person with you than without you.
The writers basically try to gaslight you into thinking that they've done such a great job of redeeming him when they haven't.
They really wanted, but you know, it's that fan reaction to the bad boy. You love the bad boy,
Right.
and we had previously redeemed all our bad boys, and so the pattern was there.
And that's a shame because he is the one who gets the happy ending, while his brother, who is 10 times the better man, dies, and we're meant to feel that this is just. This is how it should end. But it shouldn't have. Damon should have died for his brother. That is how this story should have ended, and Elena should have taken the cure and moved on with her life because, as Klaus smartly noted in season 3,
The worst thing for Elena Gilbert is the two of you.
Damon and Elena's relationship was never on the same level as her and Stefan's. Treating it as though it was is insulting because regardless of whether you're a DE fan, Damon is a terribly written character who deserved better than Elena. And Elena deserved better than him. And we, the audience, deserved a better character. As much as the first 3 seasons of the show were forever hit, nothing will ever beat that first season. And every time I rewatch it, I'm reminded of what could have been. And what kind of character we could have gotten instead.
Damon. Hello, brother.